Hi, my name is Benedict. This video is going to be subtle, so if you're looking for one of those videos where there's stark difference in the A-B, this is not going to be one of them because it's far more realistic. A lot of those things are designed to sell something. This is designed to show you genuine difference. If that offends you, by all means, find another video to watch. If you are intrigued about a more subtle approach, then please bear with this. It might take some time to understand the difference. What we're looking at is, if we're to use fashionable terms, the difference between a digital and an analog mix. But what people perceive by those terms now is completely different from what it actually means. People take static things that are rigid to be digital and therefore bad, which is silly, and analog to be mobile and furry and good, which is silly. But that's become the new definition or misdefinition of the terms. It's like, oh man, that sounds analog. It's got nothing to do with whether it's got valves or whatever. It's just to do with the fact that to them it sounds a little bit more mobile. Plus, a lot of what people are calling analog is just plain distorted. It wouldn't have cut mustard back in the day when things really were analog, and that's a personal fashionable choice. It's not got anything to do with the term or even a legitimate misuse of the term. So we look at the difference between a little bit of music and elements of the mix which are rigid and therefore quite flat versus mobile and therefore deeper and more engaging. Again, the differences are going to seem subtle. So if we were to look at a typical mix for just this little section, which is just like a little in-between fragment in a piece, it would be something like this. Just like, yeah, okay, I get your point, I kind of get your idea. But the sounds are pretty static. If we now work on our sounds a little bit more to make them a bit more analog, mobile, moving. If we swap out our thoughtless preset for a considered reverb, and if we step away from a reverb unit entirely and create something unique, we can go from this, which is pretty flat, this which has got a bounce to it. But wait, boys and girls, there is more, in the sense that we can go into looking at controlling the whole mix and making that move together as well. So we've got our mastering off at the moment. This is going to bring in several processes, but it is also going to show us the difference. So we've got the analog work, mobile. If we apply this to the flat, you hear how it helps, but it's not till we get to here that we've got this richness and movement overall. And when people are looking for analog, this is what they really are looking for. And they miss that by going out and invariably buying tools that they don't need and probably don't even understand, and sometimes which are plain flummery, as in when you A-B, they add a couple of dB and an EQ curve, which is okay. If you bought a sound goodifier, it makes it sound gooder, but you haven't bought something that's more mobile. You've just bought an A-B comparison, and that's not going to help you when you actually get into doing your mix, because the mix isn't going to sound better unless you're sitting there A-Bing it. But your listener is not going to be sitting there A-Bing it. They're just going to be hearing either this, or they're going to be hearing this. And there's not going to be any sense of A-B. There's just going to be, do I feel this or do I not feel this? Do I want to keep listening to this? Do I want to listen to this again? Versus, there's a cat video. Let's walk through our processes. We'll start with the digital. So we've got a couple of sounds. Bass sound. Let's turn off all the reverb. What we want to be looking for is the feel. Which moves, which bounces nicer. That's a little rigid. It's bad, but it's a little rigid. This gets a bounce, a little bit of pop and a little bit of a grind. So if we look at these, we've got exactly the same patch twice. I know because I created a sound, copied it, and then made some changes. As you see here, there's nothing going on in our modulation section. Reason's devices are wonderful, but they don't come with groovy movement things built in, analog drifts and this, that, and the other built in, with the exception of the new polytone, which is cool. So to do those things, you've got to do it yourself. Now, while I can see the argument that people go, oh, but I don't want to have to do that myself, it should do it for me, so I will pay a lot of money for somebody who's made those decisions. But understand, somebody's made one set of decisions. And yes, you can go, oh, but the J2600 and what have you is famous. Therefore, if I get a clone, I will have famous sound. Again, that's an argument. You can go down that path if you want. But understand that when you get an emulation of an instrument, even if you get the instrument, I could get the keyboard that was being used by the guys in Ultravox or OMD. And you know what? When I make my record, it's not going to sound like Ultravox or OMD. So it's a fantasy. Don't go down that path. One of the great things here is that we can control what we do. So we've got a pretty simple sound here. And then we've got the same sound, but what I've added here is that I've got the second oscillator modulating the filter cutoff. So with that, it starts to add a little bit of movement and grind. How you set that up? Entirely up to you. You're not looking for a nasty noise, because remember, digital instruments don't sound nasty. Analog instruments don't sound nasty. Analog instruments aren't distorted by their nature. What happened as digital instruments came in is that movement, with components just being all over the place and changing temperature and this, that, and the other, was filtered out. And it was filtered out for good reason, because there's nothing worse than having an instrument that was never in tune. I mean, it's bloody useless. So there were good things, putting things under tighter control. But like any of those things, tighter control meant that people just did the same thing they did before, the minimum they could do, and then wondered why it wasn't lively. It's a bit like getting a bass player who goes boom, 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 versus one that goes boom, 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 boom. One of them has put some effort in, the other one's just a lazy bastard. Expecting the lazy bastard to suddenly sound better at the flick of a switch, the analog either button, it's flawed at best. And if he hasn't got a movement, the lazy bastard, you can say, dude, you need to make some more stuff. So you go boom, bang, boom, bang. But you know what? It's still batshit boring, because the guy who can play well, or who can just play boom, 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 with finesse, with feel, has move, has groove, there's a reason why he's worth money. So we've added some movement in here. We've also set it so that our every time we press a note, it starts at a slightly different pitch, and then he's wandering. There are various ways you can do that. Look at what you do. This didn't have a random as a function. But you could create that in various possible ways using either the straight sample and hold or the slow, soft noise movement. Sample and hold would sit there and hold for a long period of time if you set it up right. This one will just start if you've set to key sync and give you a new and then start to wander from there. I chose that option, right or wrong, doesn't matter. And then we've also applied this LFO1 movement to the filter frequency. So it's not going to be a big movement. You don't want to hear a big movement because that's not the plan. We just want movement. We want things to be a little bit different. I possibly could have applied it over here, but nonetheless, all we want is that so that things are not exactly the same. Same but different every time. So if we're listening to... Let's just mute this guy. Yeah, how it's... Because every time we hear something, it's in a slightly different position. And as I so commonly say, the nature of the human brain is that we're designed to be hunters. We look for difference. We filter out what is the same. I don't need to keep looking at every single leaf on this bush because they're not moving. Once they start to move, that possibly tells me there's a wabbit. So it's the movement that we're keyed to. So the flat, after a little while, we go, okay, I know everything that's here. I don't need to pay special attention to this anymore. Whereas here, oh, it's slightly different every single time. So there is the excitement of there might be wabbits, as well as constantly being drawn to it not being exactly the same. That really, boys and girls, is the difference between what people call digital and analog. Or what people call MIDI sound as well, because it's like it's so flat and so lazy. It's that bass player that goes boom, boom. It's like there's no movement there. Boom, 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 boom. That's movement. It's not the same every time. Now, going, okay, yeah, I'll do your pattern, the interesting one, the boop, boop, boom, and I'll just do it over and over. Boop, boop, boom, boop, boop, boom, boop, boop, boom. That's bad shit boring again. I watched a video this morning about a certain DAW and how it's now got these features, things that we've been able to do in Reason all along, and you could have done in that DAW, but he was pointing out, here's my pad sound. Oh, and that's, I don't want to say it's boring, but you know what, dude, it's boring. Your chord's fine, because a chord's a chord's a chord's a chord's a chord. There's no good or bad chords, but the problem was, it was the same chord over and over, because it was an audio loop. How it got there, I don't know. But the real problem there was because he was playing the same chord over and 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 over. Yeah, it's boring. So you then put in a whole lot of producery tricks. I know he was showing things, but nonetheless, the first thing he should have said is, rather than this producery shit, maybe we should just play some different chords. Or even just inversions if we have to play the same chord or something. But saying, oh, it's okay to do this, you can solve that by doing all these other things, is like, no, you need to actually play different chords. Even here, my little section has some movement. Nothing's the same 100% between the two sections within here. It's subtle movement, I admit, but nonetheless that movement makes a difference. So that's our bass, and then we've got our string. Again, exactly the same patch. This one's got nothing but the modulation, chorus, and a delay. That's it. Pair of oscillators using the preset inbuilt sawtooth waveform, so it's all nice and perfect and clean and tidy. When we go over to the other side, I built my own oscillator forms, which are slightly different. I've added a little bit of noise to them. And you see it's not quite the same from one to another, just a tiny bit of noise, so they're moving. I've done the same thing. I've used an LFO running pretty fast, so it's not really audio rate, to control this filter frequency. So we don't want it so that we can fully hear it, but we want just at that point where it stops feeling flat, because this is moving the whole time. So between our oscillators moving the time, our filter is moving all the time, as is engine 1's pitch, so we're moving this and this the same. I'd like to spread things out a little bit more, but you can use the one movement thing in a couple of different places, but just try to make sure that they're not ganging together and therefore becoming same. Through key, as in the keyboard itself, I've actually got it going a little flat as it goes into the bass and a little sharp as it goes into the treble, but that is then offset with a random switch, so it chooses the amount between here and there every single time. So we've got the advantage with one entry of using random pitching every time I press a key, as well as this slightly offset keyboard. And a great piano tuner actually doesn't tune a piano perfectly flat the whole way through, as a little Korg box would do. They actually do shape the keyboard. So this is not broken, this is pretty common. Plus it means that higher notes get a little sweeter and lower notes have a down pulling feel. You can set it however you want, but it is a method which is actually surprisingly cool. I'd applied different amounts to each oscillator, so again they're constantly moving. So those relationships are always a little bit different, and then I've applied just a straight random to engine 2, as well as it being pitch offset, which is on the other one, and I'm seeing I've got this random then being used. I've changed the LFO rate, which is our vibrato rate, so every single key press, the vibrato is a slightly different rate, and that's good. That just makes things feel different. Another thing that I might change is the speed of the envelope for the filter, or the speed of attack or decay settings, so that every note is just slightly different. It doesn't take a lot. 2 or 3 things is normally absolutely plenty. So we then get that difference between the rather flat and regular, nice, but flat and regular, and a richer sound. Oh, I've also got the distortion here, so that takes some of the fizz off the top, as well as potentially doing a little bit of shaping of the waveform there. So you do get some tonal differences, and I tried as much as I could to minimize those tonal differences. So again, we weren't going to get this marked sound goodifier A-B. It's in the flow and the movement, and honestly try this yourself so then you can start to feel it, but just be aware that you're not getting 47 dB or even half or 1 dB difference A to B, because that's going to give you a skewed feeling. For a while there I had the flat version sounding better because it was just simply louder, because the movement did reduce some of the level. So even those levels back up, found the culprit, and that meant it's more accurate for you, if not quite as dramatic in the A-B. So flat, mobile, now people are going to use just a reverb preset, so I've just got the default thing that comes with the RV7000 when you install it. Here, it's not great. Now I've taken the same preset and made some changes. Easiest way to hear that, obviously, is with just our drums. No reverb. Yeah, it's just kind of flubby. It's messy. There's no magic here, because they don't move together. Now this has got a sense of moving together. And then this sounds weird if your expectation of a reverb is that it needs to sound like this, or worse, like this. It's just these individual taps, kind of. But again, when we look at a whole mix, let's just take the flat version. Notice how it suddenly becomes richer, deeper. Little flat and square, richer, deeper, and actually wider, because the way it's designed will just to sound wider. And then, of course, now the big differences in here are obviously we have a couple of layers of saturation, and that's saturation, not distortion, even though technically they are the same thing, but it's mild. I don't want to hear any distortion. I just want to hear the subtle overtones, the brightness that comes from it, and then I've just added a EQ curve as though I were mastering this. So focusing on clarity and beauty and what have you. Again, a little bit more saturation. So a few layers of that, very, very subtle. They build up to be exciting. This is just compensating for the loss that we've got here, because this is the big thing that you're really hearing here. Flat. And glue compression. So this, as you see, is really quite slow. It's 70 milliseconds, but this is not a recipe. Set this knob to 70 milliseconds and you'll be right. You have to feel this. The way that I do this, and I've showed this lots of times, is set your threshold as low as you can, set your ratio really high. Infinity isn't always the best, but 16:1 or something like is pretty darn good. And then it's going to sound pretty crappy. It'll distort even. We turn this up until we get the point where we can start to feel a groove. Then, and that grooves, but to me it's a little, so I like it being looser. And you're generally going to want this to be shorter. There's no reason you can't have it longer. But you generally want it to recover so that it can catch that next bit and groove. But not just a kind of on-off groove. It's not a square wave we're looking for. We're looking for a rolling kind of thing, and that's going to be different in every situation. And you can then raise this till it just starts to bite, or you can go down to a really low ratio and set a relatively low threshold. Flat. Grooving, we can feel that as it moves with the bass, and it really pulls our drum and bass together. I will commonly do that at a rhythm bus, so that's grabbing my drums and bass together and having something like that happen, but doing it here is something that I do basically on every mix as well. It's that subtle movement. If you see that you're running lots of this, then you're probably doing it wrong. I'm pretty confident you're doing it wrong. Most of the time I've only got like a tiny bit. But here I was happy to have a bit more because it's a very simple piece. So up to 4 dB is generally more than enough. So that gives us a movement, flat, la da ba bo 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 bo. We haven't changed any of the content, we've merely made everything move. And this is the really important thing that is missed. And where people have little to no reverb, and by reverb, I don't mean a reverb on every single instrument. That's really dumb, really, really dumb. Yeah, your processor can handle it these days, but the problem is there's no universal room. There's no one space that this thing is happening in. So my reverb is always one bus. I don't have more than one send bus as a general rule. If I need echoes, then I'll apply the echo individually on each of these, which I have. I've just been lazy and put them inside the synths. Normally I would probably have them outside, so echo units and what have you. But I will send onto the one bus, and I don't then have a second reverb on a second send and and 4 delays and some choruses on the next 16 sends, because they're no longer part of the room. They're the original sounds within the room, and then it bounces outside the room to the echoes, and you're just like, what kind of a weird universe are you creating here, dude? So people might go, oh, but it's not as technically producery, and it's like, no, my job is not to prove how producery I am. My job is to deliver, like to take in something that sounds like this, and deliver something that feels like this. And as you see, it's not one thing. So many producers these days are busy trying to do the job as fast as they can, and then slowing themselves tremendously by trying to solve what they should have done in the first place, which is just work out how to make things move. And sound goodifier plugins, as I keep saying, commonly only have an A-B effect, not really a movement effect. Work on adding a few layers of movement. 2 or 3 is generally plenty. You don't need 14,000 layers of movement. Sorry if the rain's getting a bit loud. You only need 2 or 3 things, because this is not the only sound in the mix, or at least I hope it's not the only sound in the mix. If it's a real feature sound, yes, you might put more in, but most of the time we're working in a mix. And even here, I've got a 3 sound mix. I've got my drums, I've got my bass and my strings, and I've mixed it, balanced it in such a way that they come together and they work, and then the compressor in here makes them groove nicely. Alright, if this is some work that you would like to either have done for you directly, or would like to take some time one-on-one to learn, because it's not a case of press this button, then I'm happy to work with you. Reach out. There are ways to contact me below. Otherwise, get out there, practice this stuff. Have a great day.